Was that a hit or what the fuck? Fire.
This is a sensation. The loudest emergency in Russia. In the sky over Moscow, air defense mistakenly attacked a passenger plane. The Minsk-Moscow flight. The pilot's last words, "We're on fire, our own are shooting us down."
Pilot of the aircraft on the line.
I repeat, this is a civilian route.
Permission confirmed. We're being targeted by air defense. I repeat, air defense is firing at a civilian aircraft.
The Russian aircraft ended up in the sky over the Moscow region. A Panzer missile mistook it for an enemy drone. The explosion occurred during the approach to land at Sheremetyevo.
This is not a target. There are people here. I repeat, the civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV. Record this. Altitude maintained. Route approved. We are under heavy fire.
New secret data has surfaced. There is panic in the Ministry of Murder. Military communications are down. Was this Putin's order or a system failure? The cover protocol has been implemented at Vnukovo and Sheremetyevo. Takeoffs and landings. There is panic and evacuation there. Breaking news. Russian air defense attacked a passenger plane on the Minsk-Moscow route. This is the most high-profile emergency of the night. New details have emerged. The Pantsir system opened fire right in the sky over the Moscow region. The airliner was mistaken for a drone. The plane sustained damage but managed to make it to Sheremetyevo. The pilot's last words, "Our own are shooting us down."
This is the pilot of the aircraft speaking.
I repeat, this is a civilian route. Clearance has been confirmed. We are being targeted by air defense. I repeat, air defense is firing at a civilian aircraft. This is not a target. There are people here.
I repeat, the civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV.
And this is not an isolated incident. Overnight, there was a wave of explosions and fires across Russia. Russian air defense is now firing on its own. Shells are falling on residential neighborhoods. An apartment building caught fire in the Moscow suburbs. Apartments are burning in Pushkin as well. UAVs are attacking Moscow, the city center, and the Moscow suburbs.
Listen, it's some kind of tragedy right now.
Drones are crashing into apartment buildings. There's a fire there.
Here are the fragments, and over there an apartment is burning. It's terrifying the way it exploded. I just managed to run away in time.
Everything is burning. Apartments are on fire. People are screaming. A large-scale evacuation is underway.
Now missiles. Something just hit. Everything flew around me along with the glass.
Muscovites are screaming. In Dubna, the Kronstadt enterprise where drones are produced has been attacked again. In Tula, a series of strikes hit the design bureau where air defense systems are developed. Strikes have been recorded in Kursk, Tula, Tver, Moscow, and the Moscow region, and Dubna. Russia is in panic. And most importantly, in Belgorod, a Russian air defense missile also hit a residential building. Today is one of the most shameful episodes in the history of Russian air defense. They shot down their own passenger plane. Who gave the order? Why is the air defense operating blindly? And who's next? While Moscow is putting out fires in apartment buildings, the Panzer systems are firing indiscriminately into the sky. Today we are joined by the well-known military analyst Colonel Roman Svitin. He will explain how this is even possible and what it means for Putin and the front. And what will happen next.
A couple of planes will crash after being hit by these Panzers, and believe me, the third one simply won't take off. They'll ground them and just sit tight, quietly, not making a move. First of all, the Russians do have a very good army air defense system. It's the Panzer. There's the Panzer 1, Panzer 2. They've already packed 48 missiles into the second one, while the first has 12. So it's a decent machine, an excellent machine, but it needs to operate in a combat environment. That is when everything and everyone around is an enemy, as they say. That's the mode it operates in. Well, this is Army Air Defense, an Army surface-to-air missile system designed to cover troops on the move. Even during an offensive, it's used precisely to provide cover when everything that moves is shot down, because at that point, everything is considered hostile. Then these Panzers, it's a decent machine, but I'll say it again, it's an army mechanism. They deployed it at civilian airfields. Well, only the Russians could come up with that. So using such a good machine in this way to destroy any flying object, regardless of its level, including drones, is just what they do. It has cannons. Well, the Panzer one has cannons, and they work pretty well. And the same goes for its missiles. The missile has a range of up to 20 kilometers, with an effective radius of 18 to 20 kilometers. It can practically take down everything. So these panzers are stationed by the Russians at airfields on rooftops, and they've even put one on the Ministry of Defense building. Naturally, if it starts firing in all directions, let me repeat, it's supposed to operate roughly out in the fields when advancing on the enemy, when covering its own troops. But here they're putting it right in the center of Moscow on top of a high rise. So where is it going to shoot? It'll end up firing at the high rises themselves. Here, within a 20-kilometer radius of where the Panzer is stationed, people should be having a nervous breakdown. Absolutely. A nervous breakdown is guaranteed because at any moment, a Panzer missile could end up in your toilet. Can you imagine? You sit down and then surprise. Good evening. We're from Ukraine. That's pretty much how it happened this time, by the way. We had a massive problematic attack, I would say, in terms of efficiency. For the sixth time, we've said there's no point in striking the Russians in all directions, as they call it. After all, they have those same panzers deployed and they shoot down most of it. It's better to hit a single area, but nevertheless, they struck Kronstadt. That's in Dubna. There's actually a serious complex there. First of all, Dubna is one of Russia's technological centers north of Moscow. It's about 140 kilometers, I think, from Moscow. But nevertheless, the Nuclear Research Center is also located there, one of the main ones in Russia. You'd still need to go there, take a look at what they're running around in circles, those protons and neutrons. They're going in that direction. They run them clockwise, not counterclockwise. It's the same situation here. In Dubna and in Kronstadt, they assemble components and units for Russian aviation missile technology. That place should have been shut down a long time ago. So it would be better if all our drones, for example, targeted Dubna and took out one or another facility there. Both of them need to be taken out. But for now, we're talking about a fan-shaped strike. Nevertheless, this fan-shaped strike hit at least a dozen targets. For the Russians, well, they're definitely having nervous breakdowns because they fired off their missiles in all directions. They even tried to shoot down their own plane. It didn't work. Just imagine how clumsy they are. They couldn't even shoot down a civilian plane. I mean, if you look at it from this perspective, obviously that's sarcasm on one hand, but on the other hand, it's also an indicator of certain technical capabilities of these types of weapons. And as for the fact that the panzers will be hitting civilian targets, that's 100% certain. As long as they're stationed in residential areas, they're definitely going to hit high-rise buildings. So get ready to take hits from your own side. Well, it's nothing new. Russians are used to it.
Friends, please like this video. Write in the comments what you think about the Panzer firing at a civilian plane at civilian targets. Once again, this is very important. Russian air defense is firing at its own targets. Everything is falling onto residential apartments. A high-rise caught fire in the Moscow suburbs, and in Pushkin, it's burning too. In Penza, there's a fire at the thermal power plant, and the city is in a blackout. In Belgorod, an air defense missile hit a residential building, and in Dubna, the Kronstadt enterprise, where drones are produced, was attacked again. In Tula, there was a series of strikes on the design bureau where air defense systems are developed. Strikes are being recorded in Kursk, Tver, the Moscow region, and Dubna. And Russia is in a panic. Roman Grigorievich, regarding Tula, we struck the design bureau where air defense systems are developed.
Well, you can also use drones against the design bureau. It's still in an open area, meaning it's not underground. It's not a purely military facility that's buried deep, the kind you can only reach with concrete piercing warheads or ballistic missiles. But the design bureaus themselves are quite serious targets. The Russians have design bureaus, including one in Tula, but mainly they're in the Moscow region and the Moscow suburbs. That's why I always mention Moscow. Although there is one in Tula, and there are also several design bureaus in a few other cities up to the Urals at least, which are involved in the development of both aviation and missile technology, and naturally ground-based weapon systems as well. And now the main innovative aspects are related to drones, control systems, and new warhead systems. In other words, this is an entire process that needs to be destroyed at its root. And so basically, when it comes to design bureaus, well, it makes sense to use drones. Because how much can a drone actually carry? Well, 50 kilograms of explosives. It won't do anything to a military facility that's buried 3 floors underground. It just won't work. Sometimes the design bureau is located in a penthouse somewhere where the designers like to get some fresh air. And then a fierce drone comes flying in, and it's fierce, and the drone hits simultaneously from both sides. But in reality, of course, drones are better used against oil refineries. When it comes to oil refineries, believe me, even a single drone, if it gets through and completes its mission, can inflict extremely serious damage. Why? Because an oil refinery is ready to burn on its own. You just need to bring a match, and here 50 kilograms of explosives are dropped right on top of it.
Roman Grigorievich, regarding Dubna, where the Kronstadt enterprise was attacked, where they also produce drones. We have repeatedly discussed that Dubna is home to nuclear facilities, yes, nuclear research sites, yet we keep attacking there constantly. How important is it to carry out these strikes? You always say that the strikes need to be effective, so we actually need to almost completely destroy the target. The floor is yours.
Well, you're right. Even though you're a woman, you've grasped the main idea. Exactly. There's no point in wasting our drones if there's no efficiency. Let's say we produced 100 drones. First of all, people chipped in for these drones. They were produced, purchased, and delivered to the troops. After that, target designation takes place. They fly off in all directions, but there's point air defense there. The same Panzer systems are deployed. So the Panzer, for example, is loaded with 12 missiles. So if you send a 13th drone there, it will get through and complete its mission. And the first 12, the Panzer will shoot down well, or it will shoot down however many it can. That's why it makes no sense to just send drones in all directions, 5 per Panzer. They'll just shoot them down. What's the efficiency of that? In other words, when there's no efficiency, then the question arises, is this just a disposal of drones? I've already explained it in simple terms. That's how any air defense system works. There's what's called the interception coefficient of the system. So to exceed this interception coefficient at a single point, you need to send about twice as many drones as that coefficient. If there's a single Panzer, just to put it simply, if there's one Panzer and it has 12 missiles loaded, then with one salvo, roughly speaking, it can shoot down 12 drones. That means you need to send 24 drones there, and then they will accomplish their combat mission. But instead, they sent out 5 at a time. From the information flow, Dasha and I can only confirm, yes, there was some kind of drone flight somewhere, but what's the efficiency of that? That's what I'm saying. Even you are already clearly identifying this. Efficiency is important, and that's much more important than the informational message itself about someone flying somewhere or someone shooting at someone. I mean, there's absolutely nothing military about this. There's a kind of theatricality to it, but believe me, actors have never won wars. Wars are won by military professionals who plan combat missions and allocate enough forces and resources to each mission in order to achieve a certain level of efficiency. But now, at least when it comes to target designation, some theatrical techniques are being used and nothing more. There are these little announcements. They announce something, collect money for tickets, and then everyone scatters. Like gypsies, but only in the worst negative sense.
Roman Grigorievich, here's another batch of information. Last night, the Lukovitsy aircraft plant in the Moscow region of Russia was attacked. This was confirmed by the National Security and Defense Council. It specializes in the production and modernization of MiG-29 and MiG-31 fighter jets, their modifications, and also participates in the development of new combat aviation models, in particular, projects for a promising frontline fighter, this is a quote, based on the MiG platform. It is also involved in the modernization cycle of Geran drones, wrote Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. What do you say?
Well, this just confirms our point. Look at what the Center for Countering Disinformation people are saying. A plant producing MiGs was attacked. As a military man, I immediately asked these performers, did you destroy the plant? Will MiGs still be able to take off or not? What will they answer? No, it wasn't destroyed, but it was attacked. What's the point of this attack? So that in the information flow, the Center for Countering Disinformation people could say that it was attacked. Now, if the Center for Countering Disinformation clearly confirmed that after our drones attacked, the production cycle of the MiG-29 was halted for a month or 2 or 3, then that would be some kind of efficiency coefficient. What do they say? They say such and such factory was attacked. There were attacks in Dubna, like some factory there, something was attacked there. Then what's the use of these attacks? That's what I'm talking about. So either keep quiet then, don't talk about the fact that your suckers in this case, just keep silent that you simply burned through several dozen drones, basically sending them straight into the enemy's air defense. They achieved nothing. The Center for Countering Disinformation confirmed this clearly. The report goes like this: a factory was attacked and that's it. But in reality, the report that should have been given is the factory was destroyed, the target was destroyed. But I understand why they can't say that, because you can't destroy a military factory with drones. Military factories are built to withstand a nuclear strike, a nuclear weapon. So how are you going to destroy it with a 50-kilogram drone? Next question, then why are you sending these drones to military factories? What's the point of sending them? For what purpose? For what? To dispose of the drones. I'll say it again, where drones can actually be sent at targets that explode and burn on their own, at above ground depots, not underground, but above ground ones. There are transshipment depots, so-called transit warehouses, located at certain distances, like 500 or 700 kilometers away. So those are the kinds of targets you can hit. You can target airfields, oil refineries, and that's it. Well, you can also target Crimea. Why can you target Crimea? If you approach from the sea, it's inconvenient for them to shoot down because they're afraid that our Magara drones with anti-aircraft missile systems could take down their helicopters and planes. This has already happened more than once. In other words, there are no more targets for drones. That's why our CPD guys and our politically motivated target spotters need to finally drop this whole act of showmanship. Let the military handle the targeting and target designation and allocate enough forces and resources to destroy the given target. And believe me, when the military does the calculations, there are certain coefficients involved. When they figure out how many drones need to be sent, for example, to destroy that same target in Dubna, then we won't hear anything more about it. We'll hear that 100, 150 drones entered Dubna, and believe me, nothing will be left there anymore, at least for this particular task, but just to burn them for no reason. What can I say? No matter how much we talk about this, and now everyone is starting to talk about it, our political leadership is becoming way too obvious. Such great target designators they are. But they're not even giving target coordinates. They've started an interesting trend. They're approving targets. Some targets get approved, others don't. That's all there is to it. Those who didn't pay up for the approved targets, well, and for the unapproved ones, most likely, they did pay. Remember that old joke when a traffic cop checks your documents and keeps saying, not allowed, not allowed, not allowed. But as soon as he sees a tenner, oh, now it's allowed, go ahead. It's pretty much the same situation here. That's how it is. Well, at least that's how it looks from an analytical point of view. But as for how it really is, well, that's for counterintelligence to deal with, disposing of our drones wherever they end up.
Roman Grigorievich, considering the aviation collapses, can we assume that the time will really come when the Russian Pantsir will shoot down its own civilian planes taking off from Sheremetyevo or Pulkovo?
Well, after a couple of planes go down from being hit by these Pantsirs, believe me, the third one just won't take off. They'll ground them and everyone will just sit tight, quietly, not making a move. They'll travel by train up to the Urals, and only after the Urals will they fly. Well, how far is it to the Urals? 2,000 kilometers. They'll rattle along, it's not a problem.
Successfully demobilized. Commander of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Ilyin Sergei. No details have been reported, but everyone is saying it's karma. The AFU, GUR, and SBU will find every war criminal no matter where they are. And the Chief of Staff of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Bashkardin Leonid. Roman Grigorievich, the floor is yours.
This was a strike on the headquarters of the 155th, and in fact there was an initial and a repeated strike. And at that time, almost the entire command of the 155th Brigade was wiped out, along with the former brigade commander, who at that moment was also, you could say, already the former deputy commander of the Black Sea Russian fleet. So it was a significant elimination. About a dozen high-ranking officers were taken out then. For the Russians, actions like these of ours are very effective. They have a deep bench. Everyone wants to become admirals, generals, and so on and so forth. So you could say we actually helped the enemy climb the career ladder. But in reality, the 155th Brigade has already been wiped out 649 times. They're from Ugledar. In Ugledar, they lost 2 full units. For example, the brigade commander who was in Ugledar, he was taken out. And then the new brigade commander who replaced him was also taken out, but this time near Kursk. This direction is very favorable for us because the Russians don't have such a serious layered line of defense, specifically in the Kursk direction. Why not? They're extremely frightened idiots. They thought we wouldn't move toward Moscow. So in the Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod regions, there isn't a defensive line like, for example, the Surovikin line in Zaporizhia or Donbas, which has been built up over 11 years. These extremely frightened idiots don't have anything like that. They are covering this direction either with the naval infantry or with paratroopers. The naval infantry is mainly the 710th Naval Infantry Brigade, that's the Crimean one, and the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, that's from Vladivostok. There was also the Caspian Naval Infantry Brigade from the Caspian region, several units there, plus the Ivanovo paratroopers. It turns out there are paratroopers in Ivanovo, or rather there were. Basically, they gathered up the last guys, sent them to Kursk, and now in Ivanovo, well, they'll have to start an LGBT community there because there are no men left. But something has to be done because the women in Ivanovo are unbelievably beautiful. So that's the kind of attrition happening along the Kursk direction, specifically in the area where even the leadership of the 155th Brigade was wiped out. That's Glushkovo, that's Lgov, that's Rilsk, that's Koronovo, that's Tetkino. So these are the rear areas of the Russian course that's now still trying to make some moves in the Sumy direction.
Since January, Russia has lost 100,000 soldiers killed. Not total losses, but killed in action. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, after meeting with Lavrov. Give your assessment of this political statement.
Well, if Lavrov confirmed such losses to him, then we can believe him. At the very least, Rubio wouldn't just say that for no reason. The question is, in what context is he saying all this? After all, they're still trying to stop the fighting by giving up our territory. Basically, it's a capitulation scenario. A ceasefire at this point, according to Rubio and his associates, that includes Trump. That's capitulation for Ukraine. In other words, it means the Russian army would maintain control over the occupied part of Ukraine. That's a fifth, more than a fifth, over 20% is already under occupation. So in this context, when fears are being stoked, stay stoked, well, then you can see and understand that we're simply being pushed toward capitulation, to the loss of territory, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and so on and so forth. I think there's no point in paying attention to such statements. Why? Because, well, Ukrainians won't stop. This concerns Ukrainians. Ukrainians or Cossacks have never given their land to anyone. Land and freedom. These are the main slogans of our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. That is, we will definitely carry out our combat mission right up to the state border. So after we reach the state border, destroy part of the Russian army. By that time, God willing, with Malyuk and Budanov sanctions, we will destroy Russian oil refineries and the Russian economy will collapse. That's when we'll talk about the losses of the Russian army and we'll confirm them. And believe me, the numbers won't be in the hundreds of thousands. They'll be in the millions of Russians.
God willing. Dear audience, once again, please like this video. Share your opinion and analysis in the comments and write a few kind words to our duo with Roman Grigorievich. We work for you 3 times a week, and that's very important. Roman Grigorievich, regarding the idea of not stopping. So we've come to an important topic, occupied Crimea. Now, I will present you with a series of information for analysis and discussion. 2 powerful explosions were reported in the Krasnodar district, according to subscribers of Crimean Wind. Next. A missile launch in the Zhenkoy district at 11:25. A loud explosion was heard in the Krasnodar district. Russian air defense was active in Zhenkoy. A massive Ukrainian drone attack is being reported in occupied Crimea. Right now, there is a massive traffic jam stretching 26 kilometers before the Kerch Bridge at the exit from Crimea. What do you say, Roman Grigorievich? Our attack on Crimea continues.
At the very least, I think our drone specialists have teamed up with the shawarma vendors. And a 26-kilometer traffic jam, can you imagine how much money they're making there right now at the exit from Crimea? And now even corn has started to move. I mean, this whole Crimean process, we understand it perfectly well. They're going to make a fortune, a real fortune. So after getting a certain cut from those shawarma vendors, you can crank out even more, or at least buy more drones and send them wherever they're needed. But in reality, of course, there was an attack on Crimea last night. Drones were flying, missiles were flying. That's right, Neptunes were being intercepted. At night, Russians on social media were freaking out, saying everything there would be wiped out. Not everything. The main targets were the anti-aircraft missile systems. By the way, it was the air defense system that tried to intercept, specifically the one located in Zhenkoy. Why is it always Zhenkoy? We've talked several times about strikes on Zhenkoy. Why is that? Well, there's an airfield there. It's a tactical airfield, mainly for army aviation. Helicopters, they rearm there. So there's an air defense system stationed there, either an S-300 or S-400. Since we've already taken it out, they've exposed it again there. And that's why people constantly hear activity, entries and exits in the area of Krasnoperekopsk and around Zhenkoy as well. This is exactly the work of the Russian air defense, which covers the Kerch direction from the northwest. And so it's very important for us not to slow down. We need to strike the enemy's air defense every other night, or at least every 2 nights, including in Zhenkoy, and completely wipe it out. That was the attempt, and today drones entered the area. I think these won't be the last ones. So little by little, we're gradually getting closer to our main objective, the Kerch Bridge. Well, a 26-kilometer traffic jam. Well, that's sacred. They've been robbed, stripped, kept warm, and so on. So at this point, these are already the Russians' problems. They knew where they were going. They knew, how they'd be getting out.
Get out of Crimea, yes, but only by breaststroke or freestyle, as you suggested.
Dog paddle.
Yes, dog paddle. Roman Grigorievich has already clearly laid out all the options in previous episodes. Watch the previous episodes. Roman Grigorievich, and as the cherry on top regarding Crimea, the mobile network is down, cell phones, everything is out. And of course, the Rashists are sending messages in tears saying that nothing is working for them. Isn't that wonderful, right?
Well, the thing is, in this case, there are two options. Either write letters to your grandpa in the village or dig out your pagers. Remember how it was in the last millennium? They need to set up pager communication in Crimea. And how did the mix go? Well, at least they won't be making calls while on the road anymore after all. Although, who knows, Russians can do all sorts of crazy things.
I've prepared the following information for you as the cherry on top. Meanwhile, in Orsk, Orenburg region of Russia, a mechanical plant is on fire. According to local social media groups, the explosions are quite impressive right now, as I can see. The 8th workshop of the enterprise is burning. Supposedly, some materials caught fire. The Orsk mechanical plant is a major Russian engineering enterprise that produces goods for the defense industry, including shell casings and components for multiple launch rocket systems. It also specializes in equipment for the oil and gas sector. Roman Grigorievich, well, the oil and gas sector sweetens the deal for us a little. The floor is yours.
Because our concerned citizens managed to accomplish several tasks at once. First, it really is a military facility. Second, it's an industry including the oil and gas sector. And third, and most importantly, as you noticed, our concerned citizens highlighted where the Orks lair is located, in Orsk. So specifically there, that's where all the Orks are coming at us from, at least in terms of information. So a big thank you to our concerned citizens. A really big thank you. Why? Because we can clearly see exactly what their specific actions and behaviors are. They really are causing certain problems for the Russian economy. Oil transfer mechanisms are burning of various types. They're setting fire to pipelines and oil pumping stations. In Komsomolsk-on-Amur, they burned down an oil refinery. So they're targeting the energy sector. And really all it takes is a single match. Dry brush is set on fire where the pipeline runs, and that's it. You can basically write off the pipeline, and even more so the gas pipeline. So they're taking action. And work is also being done directly at enterprises, which in principle can also be put out of commission if you know how. And I'll say it again, there are plenty of people who care. Because this war, the genocidal war of the Moscow Empire against Ukraine and Ukrainians, has worn everyone out, including Russians themselves, especially when we remember that there are over 10 million ethnic Ukrainians in Russia alone. In addition to the fact that there are dozens of states, dozens of republics, territories, and governmental entities that have now been practically conquered by this Moscow empire, this Moscow Khaganate, and in the end, they too want their freedom. In other words, this prison of nations must be destroyed. It can be destroyed from within as well.
Roman Grigorievich, for the conclusion. In Russia, they are expecting drone attacks, but not from outside the country, rather from within Russia itself. Sources from the VCHK OGPU channel reported that heightened security measures were introduced for law enforcement in Moscow due to possible attacks. All defense and shelter systems have been put on high alert. FSB officers have been deployed to duty almost in full force.
Well, they're right to be afraid. Why? Because as we've been saying for the second year now, you go to the market, buy an FPV drone, attach some kind of explosive to it, send it off, and complete a combat mission. When it comes to oil refineries, that's a whole different story. With a single grenade, you can burn down an entire plant if you know where to hit. With a single grenade, you can shut down a metallurgical plant if you blow up, say, the oxygen workshop with an FPV drone or directly detonate it. There are such critical points at every plant, at every enterprise, and those who care know them very well. As for what mechanisms are used in these kinds of actions, well, each concerned person chooses for themselves, mainly to avoid getting caught by the Russian FSB, Russian police, gendarmerie, whatever you want to call them. And these mechanisms are being used. Today, for example, we discussed how in Orsk, in the center of the Russian movement in Orsk, a factory burned down, or at least a workshop did. So in terms of preparation, that's why it's correct to say that yes, this process will indeed intensify in the near future. It is already intensifying, but the concentration of certain means of destruction in one place is very important for us. It's the same as with drone aviation concentrated in one spot. And right now, the best option for everyone who cares is to gather in Moscow as well. Moscow needs to be burned too. That is, Moscow and Muscovites themselves, those who make decisions, who practically drain all the resources from all over Russia, need to understand this. They need to feel this war, and not just the war against Ukraine. This is also a war against Moldova, the Pridnestrovian Republic, Moldova, a war against Georgia. We saw this perfectly well. The war in Syria, wherever Russians go, wherever a Russian sets foot, some kind of war is bound to start.
Burning Moscow, a perfect ending. Dear audience, Roman Grigorievich and I work together 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, for viewers all over the world on my YouTube channel, Dasha Shaslivaya. Roman Svetan, a well-known analyst. Roman Grigorievich, thank you and see you again on Monday.
Goodbye.